This is your morning routine in medieval Europe. Undignified, uncomfortable, and utterly unavoidable. Every day begins with this reminder that you are not the master of your own destiny, but rather a participant in a daily survival challenge where basic human dignity is a luxury you cannot afford. Why medieval life would break you in a day. Picture this: you wake up tomorrow morning, but instead of your comfortable bed with memory foam and Egyptian cotton sheets, you find yourself transported back to the year 1325, in the heart of medieval Europe. Forget everything Hollywood has told you about gallant knights, romantic castles, and fair maidens. The reality: you probably would not survive a single day in this world of mud, misery, and unimaginable hardship. You are lying in what can generously be called a bed, though it bears no resemblance to anything you would recognize as furniture. Your mattress is a collection of straw that was salvaged from a barn floor 3 months ago. It has been rotting ever since, creating a perfect breeding ground for fleas, bedbugs, lice, and creatures so small you cannot see them but can definitely feel them crawling across your skin like tiny soldiers on a midnight march. The straw beneath you is damp, not from morning dew, but from the rain that leaked through your thatched roof during last night's storm. Everything in your world is perpetually wet, moldy, or both. The smell rising from your mattress is a complex bouquet of decay, animal waste, human sweat, and something that might be dead mice, though you try not to think about it too hard. Your blanket is a piece of wool that weighs approximately as much as a small horse. This is not because medieval sheep were particularly large, but because your blanket has not been washed since sometime during the previous winter. It has absorbed months of sweat, dirt, food spills, and various bodily fluids until it has become less of a textile and more of a biological specimen. The wool is so stiff with accumulated grime that it could probably stand upright on its own and walk away if it chose to. You try to stretch your limbs and immediately regret the decision. The air in your hut is so cold that you can see your breath, despite the fact that it is supposedly summer. There is no insulation in your walls, no glass in your windows, and no central heating system to keep you warm. Your home is essentially a wooden box with gaps large enough for chickens to walk through, which they occasionally do. Your body aches in ways that would send modern people straight to the emergency room. You are only 22 years old, but your joints creak like the door of an abandoned church. Your spine feels like it has been twisted into the shape of a pretzel by someone who had never seen a human skeleton before. Your knees sound like a bag of broken pottery being shaken by an angry child every time you try to move. This physical deterioration is not the result of old age or genetic bad luck. It is the inevitable consequence of a lifetime of malnutrition, hard labor, and sleeping on surfaces that would be rejected by modern prisoners. Your bones are soft from lack of calcium, your muscles are weak from inadequate protein, and your joints are worn down from years of repetitive manual labor that began when you were barely old enough to walk. The room around you is a masterpiece of medieval architecture, by which I mean it is a single space with no divisions, no privacy, and no boundaries between human and animal habitation. You share this charming dwelling with your parents, your 3 siblings, your elderly grandmother who coughs constantly, your uncle who snores like a wounded bear, and whatever livestock your family is lucky enough to own. Currently, your roommates include 2 goats, a pig, several chickens, and a thriving community of rats who seem to believe they are the actual landlords of this establishment. The animals are not kept in a separate area because there is no separate area. Medieval homes operate on an open concept floor plan that would make modern interior designers weep with horror. The smell in your hut is beyond description, but I will attempt it anyway. Imagine the aroma of unwashed human bodies mixed with animal waste, rotting food scraps, stale beer, wood smoke, and something that might be mold growing in the corners where the walls meet the dirt floor. Now multiply that smell by 10 and add a hint of something that died under the floorboards last winter, but was never removed because nobody could figure out exactly where it was located. There are no windows in your hut, just openings in the walls that are covered with cloths during bad weather and left open during good weather. Glass is a luxury reserved for churches and the homes of people who actually matter in medieval society. Light comes from the fire in the center of the room, candles when you can afford them, and whatever sunshine manages to sneak through the gaps in your walls. Privacy is a concept that has not been invented yet. Everyone in your family sleeps, eats, argues, gets dressed, and conducts their personal business in the same small space. You know intimate details about your relatives that you would prefer to forget, and they know equally intimate details about you. Personal boundaries are as foreign as indoor plumbing or the concept of weekends. Your clothes are the same garments you wore yesterday and the day before that, and probably for the last 6 months. You own exactly one outfit, which consists of a rough wool tunic that scratches against your skin like sandpaper made from tree bark. The fabric has absorbed so much sweat, dirt, and various bodily fluids that it has developed its own ecosystem. Small creatures have taken up permanent residence in the fibers, and you can feel them moving around as you shift position. Getting out of bed is a dangerous proposition. The floor of your hut is made of packed dirt that becomes either muddy or dusty, depending on the weather. Currently, it is covered with a thin layer of something that might be water, animal urine, or a combination of both. Your bare feet will become part of this ecosystem the moment they touch the ground, and you will carry traces of it with you. For the rest of the day, the sounds of your household waking up create a symphony of medieval misery. Your grandmother's cough echoes off the wooden walls like the death rattle of a dying dragon. Your uncle groans as he tries to move his arthritic joints. The goats bleat for food they are unlikely to receive. The chickens cluck nervously as they try to avoid being stepped on. And underneath it all, the constant scurrying of rats reminds you that you are sharing your home with creatures who are probably better fed than you are. As you lie there contemplating the day ahead, you realize that this is actually one of the better moments you will experience in the next 24 hours. You are horizontal, relatively warm under your filthy blanket, and nobody is demanding that you work yourself to death quite yet. In a few minutes, the church bell will ring, signaling the official start of another day of medieval survival, and your real troubles will begin. This is your life as a peasant in 1325. You own nothing, control nothing, and your existence depends entirely on the whims of people who consider you slightly more valuable than livestock, but only slightly. You are about to discover what it really means to live in an age when human life was cheap, comfort was non-existent, and every day was a test of your ability to endure conditions that would break the spirit of most modern people within hours. Welcome to medieval Europe, where the strong survive, the weak perish, and everyone else just tries to make it through another day without dying of something horrible. The church bell clangs in the distance like the voice of an angry god demanding your immediate attention. This is your alarm clock, and it shows absolutely no mercy for people who might prefer to sleep a little longer. There is no snooze button, no gentle wake-up melody, no gradual increase in volume to ease you into consciousness. Just the harsh bronze voice of medieval timekeeping, telling you that your brief respite from suffering has officially ended. You drag yourself out of your straw bed and immediately face the first major challenge of your medieval day: answering nature's call. In the modern world, this would involve a short walk to a private bathroom equipped with running water, toilet paper, and basic sanitation. In 1325, it involves a journey into the depths of human degradation that would make modern people question their faith in civilization. There is no bathroom in your hut. The concept of a private room dedicated solely to personal hygiene is as foreign as the idea of flying to the moon or eating chocolate for breakfast. Your toilet facilities consist of a wooden bucket that sits behind your house, assuming you are lucky enough to have a bucket. If not, you make do with whatever container you can find, or simply use the great outdoors as your personal restroom. The bucket behind your hut is already overflowing with the contributions of your family members, creating a small mountain of human waste that attracts flies like a medieval conference center for insects. Uncle Friedrich had an unfortunate encounter with some spoiled turnips last evening, and the results of that digestive adventure are now proudly displayed for all to see, smell, and accidentally step in. The aroma rising from this bucket could be classified as a weapon of mass destruction. It has the power to make grown men weep, small children faint, and horses refuse to approach your property. You hold your breath, balance precariously over the rim, and conduct your business as quickly as humanly possible, while trying not to think about the fact that this same bucket will be used by every member of your family throughout the day. After completing this deeply undignified morning ritual, you face the next challenge: disposal. In medieval Europe, waste management is refreshingly simple. You carry your bucket to the front of your house and dump its contents directly into the street. This is not considered rude, disgusting, or unsanitary. This is Tuesday morning in medieval Europe. You are supposed to shout "Gardez-le" before emptying your bucket, which is Old French for "watch out below." This warning system is theoretically designed to prevent pedestrians from being showered with human waste as they go about their daily business. In practice, nobody ever moves fast enough to avoid the cascade of excrement that follows your announcement. And most people have learned to expect regular baptisms of filth as they navigate the streets of medieval towns. The streets themselves are essentially open sewers, flowing with a delightful mixture of human waste, animal droppings, kitchen scraps, dead rats, rotting vegetables, and mysterious liquids that change color depending on the weather and the dietary habits of your neighbors. Walking from your house to the village center is like navigating a minefield, except instead of explosions, you risk stepping in something that will ruin your entire week and possibly require you to burn your shoes, assuming you own any. The ground beneath your feet squelches with every step, creating sounds that would make modern city planners resign in horror. The smell is so intense that it has developed its own weather patterns, with clouds of stench drifting from house to house. Like toxic fog, birds avoid flying over medieval villages because the air quality is worse than most industrial pollution sites. If you are fortunate enough to live near the public latrines, congratulations! You get to experience the joy of communal defecation, one of the true bonding experiences of medieval society. Picture a long wooden bench with holes cut into it, where you sit shoulder to shoulder with complete strangers, while everyone takes care of their morning constitutional simultaneously. The public latrine is a place where privacy goes to die, and social boundaries are as meaningless as personal hygiene. You might find yourself discussing the weather with the village blacksmith while you both contribute to the growing pile of waste beneath the bench. Conversations range from complaints about the harvest to gossip about who might be sleeping with whom, all conducted in an atmosphere that would make modern public restrooms seem like luxury spas. The smell inside the public latrine defies scientific description. It is a concentrated essence of human digestive byproducts, fermented to perfection in an enclosed space with no ventilation. The air is so thick you can practically chew it, and breathing through your mouth only makes things worse, because then you can taste what you are smelling. Toilet paper is a luxury that will not be invented for another few centuries, assuming civilization survives long enough to develop such advanced technology. Most people use whatever materials they can find: straw, leaves, rags, moss, scraps of cloth, or pieces of wood that have been smoothed down to avoid splinters in unfortunate places. The wealthy might splurge on a piece of wool or linen for their personal hygiene needs, but even nobles are not immune to the fundamental challenge of medieval sanitation. Some people use nothing at all, which explains why handshakes are not particularly popular in medieval society and why most social interactions involve keeping a safe distance from other people's hands. Even the aristocrats who live in grand stone castles are not much better off than the peasants when it comes to bathroom facilities. They have garderobes, which sound fancy and sophisticated until you realize that they are essentially holes cut into the castle wall that drop waste directly into the moat below. This system works adequately until you consider the military implications. Enemy soldiers have been known to climb up through these waste chutes to launch surprise attacks on the castle from within. Nothing quite says tactical advantage like crawling through a toilet to reach your enemy's bedroom. Medieval warfare was not always conducted with honor and dignity. After completing your morning bathroom adventure, you still have not brushed your teeth, washed your face, combed your hair, or done anything that might be considered basic personal hygiene. Your mouth tastes like something crawled inside it and died during the night. Your skin is grimy with yesterday's accumulation of dirt, sweat, and various substances you prefer not to identify. Your hair is home to a thriving ecosystem of parasites who have been living there so long that they probably consider themselves permanent residents rather than temporary visitors. You can feel them moving around, especially when you try to run. Your fingers through your hair, which creates a sensation like walking through a spider web in a dark basement. This is your morning routine in medieval Europe. Undignified, uncomfortable, and utterly unavoidable. Every day begins with this reminder that you are not the master of your own destiny, but rather a participant in a daily survival challenge where basic human dignity is a luxury you cannot afford. You have survived the toilet adventure, morning waste disposal ceremony. Congratulations on making it this far without dying of shame or suffocation. Now your stomach begins to make sounds that could be mistaken for the growling of a very angry bear trapped in a very small cave. Your body is demanding food, and unfortunately, you are about to discover that medieval cuisine makes modern prison food look like a gourmet feast prepared by celebrity chefs. You shuffle back toward your hut, stepping carefully around the puddles of questionable liquid that decorate your village streets like abstract art installations, created by people with no artistic talent and questionable sanity. The sun is climbing higher in the sky, which means that the temperature is rising, which means that the smell emanating from the streets is becoming more intense with each passing minute. Your breakfast awaits you inside your hut, and I use the term breakfast in the loosest possible sense of the word. What sits before you in a wooden bowl that has not been properly cleaned since the day it was carved from a tree is something that looks like it was scraped from the bottom of a muddy pond after a family of ducks had been living in it for several months. Welcome to pottage, the cornerstone of medieval peasant cuisine, and quite possibly the most depressing food ever created by human beings. This thick, greyish, lumpy substance is made from whatever ingredients your family has been able to scavenge, borrow, steal, or find growing in places where food is not supposed to grow. The base consists of grains like barley, oats, or rye. Assuming you have been fortunate enough to acquire any grains recently, to this foundation, your mother or sister or whoever is responsible for keeping the family from starving has added whatever edible substances could be located within walking distance of your hut. This might include beans if you are incredibly lucky, turnips if you are moderately lucky, onions if the gods have smiled upon your family, or mysterious green things that might be vegetables, but could also be weeds that someone mistook for vegetables in a moment of desperate optimism. The pottage pot itself is a monument to medieval cooking techniques and a testament to the human ability to survive on foods that would make modern health inspectors flee in terror. This large iron cauldron sits over your fire pit, accumulating layers of ingredients like geological strata in a very smelly, very unappetizing archaeological site. Nobody ever completely empties the pottage pot or cleans it thoroughly. Instead, family members simply keep adding water and whatever food scraps they can find, creating a constantly evolving experiment in fermentation that would fascinate microbiologists and horrify anyone with functioning taste buds. The bottom layers of this culinary creation have been simmering for weeks, possibly months, developing flavors that cannot be found in any cookbook ever written. The pot has become a living ecosystem where new ingredients are deposited on top of old ingredients, creating a complex food chain that exists entirely within the confines of your breakfast bowl. Sometimes you can identify recognizable pieces of vegetables floating in the grey sludge. Other times you encounter mysterious chunks that might be food, might be pieces of wood that fell into the pot, or might be small animals that wandered too close to the fire and never escaped. Alongside your bowl of pottage sits what medieval people generously refer to as bread, though it bears only a passing resemblance to anything that modern people would recognize as a baked good. This loaf is harder than most rocks and approximately as edible as a piece of furniture. It is made from coarse rye or barley flour that has been mixed with whatever binding agents were available at the time of baking. These binding agents might include sawdust, ground acorns, crushed bones, tree bark, or other creative ingredients that were added to make the flour stretch further, because wheat is reserved for people who actually matter in medieval society. The bread is so dense that it could be used as a weapon in combat, and so hard that eating it requires both courage and strong teeth. Assuming you still have any teeth left after previous encounters with medieval cuisine, you do not slice this bread so much as attack it with whatever tools are available and hope that your jaw muscles are strong enough to break off pieces small enough to fit in your mouth. Chewing requires the kind of determination usually reserved for major life decisions, and swallowing involves an act of faith that your digestive system is capable of processing substances that were never intended for human consumption. For liquid refreshment, you have weak ale. And before you start thinking that drinking alcohol for breakfast sounds like fun, let me explain why this is actually a survival strategy rather than a lifestyle choice. The water in your village is contaminated with everything from human waste to dead animals, making it more dangerous than a battlefield and considerably less pleasant to consume. The local stream, which looks clear and refreshing from a distance, is actually a flowing repository of every horrible substance that your neighbors have dumped into it over the past several months. Upstream from your village, other communities are using the same water source as their personal toilet, garbage dump, and animal cemetery, creating a liquid nightmare that would kill you faster than most medieval diseases. Beer, even weak beer, with very low alcohol content, is actually safer to drink than water because the brewing process involves boiling, which kills at least some of the microscopic creatures that are trying to murder you from the inside. Even children drink ale for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, though nobody looks particularly happy about this arrangement, and most people spend their entire lives slightly tipsy without ever actually enjoying the experience. You want meat for breakfast? That is adorable. Peasants might eat meat a few times per year, usually during religious festivals when the Lord feels generous enough to slaughter an animal for the entertainment of his subjects. The rest of the time, you stare longingly at the chickens and goats that your family helps to tend, knowing that these animals are far more valuable alive than dead. A single chicken represents weeks of eggs, assuming the chicken cooperates and continues laying instead of succumbing to the various diseases that regularly sweep through medieval livestock populations. Killing a chicken for one meal would be economic suicide, equivalent to burning your house down to stay warm for one night. Fresh fruit exists only during harvest season, and even then it often goes to the Lord's table before the peasants get to see any of it. Vegetables are limited to whatever grows in your small garden plot behind your hut, which usually means turnips, onions, and more turnips, with the occasional exciting addition of cabbage. If the weather has been particularly cooperative, spices are worth more than gold and considerably more difficult to obtain. A pinch of pepper costs more than you earn in a month of back-breaking labor, assuming you earn anything at all rather than simply working in exchange for the right to continue existing. Salt is so valuable that it is kept under lock and key, guarded more carefully than most people guard their children. Without refrigeration, salt is the only way to preserve meat for the winter months, which makes it more precious than jewelry and more sought after than romantic love. Your food tastes like wet cardboard soaked in pond water because seasoning is a luxury that exists only in the fantasies of people who have never experienced true poverty. As you choke down your breakfast of grey sludge and rock-hard bread, you can hear the sounds of medieval life waking up around you. Rats scurry through the walls of your hut like tiny roommates who never pay rent but always eat your food. Your neighbors are already arguing about whose turn it is to fix the communal roof, whose pig got into whose garden, and whether the local priest is sleeping with the miller's wife. The smoke from your cooking fire stings your eyes and makes breathing an adventure in respiratory endurance. Everything in your hut is covered with a thin layer of soot and ash, giving your home the ambience of a place that has recently survived a small fire, which it probably has, considering that most medieval houses burned down at least once during their brief existence. You scrape your wooden bowl clean with your fingers, knowing that this grey, lumpy, tasteless substance is all that stands between you and starvation. Your next meal is 12 hours away, assuming you survive the day and assuming there is still food available when evening arrives. You lick your fingers clean, not because the pottage was delicious, but because wasting even a drop of food is not an option when you are living this close to the edge of survival. This is medieval breakfast, not the most important meal of the day, but quite possibly the most depressing culinary experience in human history, and you get to repeat it every single morning for the rest of your hopefully short life, after forcing down your breakfast of despair and disappointment, it is time to address the daily challenge of getting dressed. This should be a simple process, considering that you own exactly one outfit and have owned exactly one outfit for your entire adult life. The concept of having multiple sets of clothes, seasonal wardrobes, or fashion choices is as foreign to you as the idea of flying to distant planets or communicating with people on the other side of the world through magical talking boxes. Your clothing consists of a rough wool tunic that you have worn every single day for the past year, possibly longer. Time becomes meaningless when every day is identical to the previous day, and you have stopped keeping track of how long you have been wearing the same garments because the information serves no useful purpose and only makes you more depressed about your circumstances. This tunic was woven by someone in your village who learned the craft from someone else who learned it from someone else, creating a chain of textile incompetence that stretches back through generations of people who had never actually seen properly made clothing. The wool was sheared from sheep who were probably not particularly healthy to begin with, then processed using techniques that prioritized speed and economy over comfort and durability. The resulting fabric feels like it was designed specifically to torture human skin. It scratches and chafes against your body like sandpaper made from tree bark and seasoned with ground glass. Every movement creates new areas of irritation, and you have developed permanent red marks where the fabric rubs against your neck, wrists, and waist. The tunic has absorbed so much sweat, dirt, food stains, and various bodily fluids over the months that it has developed its own unique ecosystem. Small insects have taken up permanent residence in the fibers, creating a mobile habitat that travels with you wherever you go. You can feel them moving around throughout the day, especially when the weather is warm and they become more active. The color of your tunic, if it ever had one, has long since faded into a shade that can best be described as medieval brown, which is not actually a color, but rather the inevitable result of combining dirt, sweat, food stains, and the passage of time. The fabric is stiff with accumulated grime, and it makes rustling sounds when you move, like dried leaves blowing across a courtyard. Underwear is a concept that has not been invented yet, or, if it has been invented, it is reserved for people who live in a completely different social stratum than you do. Most peasants simply go without any undergarments, which means that your scratchy wool tunic is in direct contact with your skin 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, creating a constant state of irritation that would drive modern people to seek psychiatric help within hours. If you are incredibly fortunate, you might own a linen undergarment, but linen is expensive and difficult to maintain, making it a luxury that most peasants cannot afford. Even if you could afford linen underwear, keeping it clean would require time, energy, and resources that you need for more pressing survival activities, like finding food and avoiding death. Your clothes have not been washed since sometime during the previous summer, assuming they were washed then, which is not guaranteed. There is no washing machine, no laundry service, no soap, and no concept of regular clothing maintenance. The process of cleaning clothes is so complicated and time-consuming that most people simply accept that their garments will remain permanently dirty. If you wanted to wash your tunic, which you do not because you understand the futility of the endeavor, you would need to haul water from the village stream, heat it over a fire using precious firewood, scrub the fabric on a wooden board using ash or lye that burns your hands, rinse it in cold water that may or may not be clean, and then hang it to dry, assuming the weather cooperates and assuming you have something else to wear while your tunic is drying. The entire process takes an entire day, uses resources that you cannot spare, often results in clothes that are cleaner but also damaged from the harsh treatment, and ultimately makes very little difference in the overall appearance or smell of your garments. Most peasants have concluded that washing clothes is not worth the effort, and they simply accept that permanent dirt is part of their personal style. Your footwear situation is equally depressing and considerably more dangerous. If you own shoes at all, they are made from untreated leather that was stitched together by someone whose main qualification was owning a needle and having some vague idea of what shoes are supposed to look like. The leather is stiff, uncomfortable, and provides about as much protection as wearing pieces of cardboard tied to your feet with string. These medieval shoes offer no arch support, no cushioning, no waterproofing, and no protection against sharp objects that litter the ground everywhere you walk. The soles are thin enough that you can feel every pebble, stick, and piece of broken pottery that you step on, creating a constant reminder that medieval life is designed to be as uncomfortable as possible. Most peasants simply go barefoot because shoes are expensive, difficult to maintain, and not significantly more comfortable than having nothing on your feet at all. Walking barefoot through medieval villages means stepping on mud, animal waste, sharp stones, broken pottery, rotting food scraps, and various other hazards that make each step an adventure in pain tolerance. Your feet have developed thick calluses that serve as natural shoes, but these calluses are constantly being cut, bruised, and infected by the hostile environment that surrounds you. Every evening, you examine your feet for new wounds, splinters, and signs of infection, knowing that a serious foot injury could make it impossible for you to work, which would mean starvation for you and your family. Your skin is a battlefield, where parasites fight for territory and resources. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, mites, and other tiny creatures have made your body their permanent home, creating a mobile ecosystem that travels with you wherever you go. Everyone in medieval society has parasites, from the lowest peasant to the highest noble, because effective pest control methods have not been invented yet. You spend significant portions of each day scratching various parts of your body, and this constant scratching has become such a normal part of medieval life that nobody considers it unusual or embarrassing. Conversations are regularly interrupted by people pausing to scratch their scalp, their armpit, or other areas where parasites like to congregate. Personal hygiene is not just neglected in medieval society. It is actively discouraged by the prevailing medical wisdom of the time. Doctors and scholars believe that bathing opens your pores and allows disease to enter your body, making cleanliness dangerous to your health. Most people develop a protective layer of dirt and grime that they wear like armor against illness and evil spirits. Your hair is home to an entire civilization of tiny creatures who have been living there so long that they have probably established their own government and social customs. You can feel them moving around, especially at night, when you are trying to sleep and they become more active. Combs exist, but they are luxury items that most peasants cannot afford. And even if you owned one, it would not solve the fundamental problem of having a head full of parasites. The process of getting dressed each morning takes approximately 30 seconds because you simply put on the same clothes you took off the night before, assuming you took them off at all. Many peasants sleep fully clothed because removing and replacing garments is more effort than most people can spare, and because being naked, even briefly, exposes you to cold, insects, and the judgmental stares of family members who share your living space. By the time you finish your morning dressing routine, you look like a person who has been dragged behind a horse through a swamp. then left to dry in a barn full of diseased animals. Your appearance would frighten small children and cause adults to cross the street to avoid getting too close to you. This is not because you are particularly slovenly or careless about your appearance, but because this is simply what human beings look like when they are forced to live without access to basic hygiene, clean clothing, or adequate nutrition. Now that you are fully dressed and looking your medieval best, it is time to face the next challenge of your day: finding enough food to keep yourself alive, while performing 12 hours of back-breaking physical labor that will leave you exhausted to care about how terrible you look, smell, or feel. Now comes the moment you have been dreading since the church bell first announced the beginning of another day in your personal version of medieval hell: work. And by work, I mean the kind of soul-crushing, body-destroying physical labor that would make modern fitness trainers weep with sympathy and labor union organizers start planning revolutionary uprisings. You are a peasant, which means your job description can be summarized in one simple sentence: do not die while making other people wealthy and comfortable. Your economic function in medieval society is to produce food, goods, and services for people who consider you slightly more valuable than livestock. But only slightly, and only on days when you are being particularly productive. You stumble out of your hut into the grey morning light and immediately face your first workplace challenge: the weather. There is no weather forecast, no meteorological service, no advance warning system to help you prepare for the day ahead. If it rains, you get soaked and continue working. If the sun beats down mercilessly, you roast in your wool clothing and continue working. If snow falls or ice forms, you shiver and slip and fall. But you continue working because stopping is not an option. There is no protective clothing designed for different weather conditions. You do not own a raincoat, an umbrella, sunscreen, or warm winter gear. You have exactly one outfit, and that outfit must serve as your protection against every possible weather condition that nature can produce. When it rains, you become a walking sponge. When it is hot, you become a human oven. When it is cold, you become a shivering collection of bones held together by sheer determination and the fear of starvation. Your workplace is the Lord's fields, stretching out before you like a brown ocean of misery that extends to the horizon and beyond. These fields do not belong to you, despite the fact that you spend more time in them than you spend in your own home. Everything you see belongs to your Lord, who lives in a stone castle several miles away, and who has probably never touched a farming tool in his entire privileged existence. Your Lord is a man who was born into wealth and power, who inherited his position from his father, who will pass his position to his son, and who considers the land and everything on it, including you, to be his personal property. You work his fields, plant his crops, tend his animals, and harvest his grain. In return, he graciously allows you to continue existing and gives you just enough food to prevent you from dying of starvation. Assuming the harvest is good and assuming he is feeling generous. Your farming tools consist of implements that would be rejected as inadequate by modern gardeners working in small backyard plots. Your plow is made mostly of wood, with a metal tip if you are extraordinarily fortunate. Your hoe is a wooden handle, attached to a piece of metal that was probably forged by the village blacksmith during a moment of creative inspiration. Your sickle looks like it was designed by someone who had heard a description of a cutting tool, but had never actually seen one. There are no tractors, no mechanical harvesters, no labor-saving devices of any kind. Everything must be done by hand, using muscle power, determination, and whatever physical strength you can summon from a body that is already exhausted from malnutrition and previous days of identical labor. The technology available to you is essentially the same technology that was available to farmers thousands of years ago, which means that agricultural progress has been remarkably slow. Plowing is accomplished using oxen, assuming your village is wealthy enough to own any oxen, which is not guaranteed. If oxen are not available, you and your neighbors take turns pulling the plow yourselves, transforming human beings into draft animals and adding a new dimension to the phrase, working like a horse. The work is so physically demanding that strong men regularly collapse in the fields, and everyone simply steps over them and continues working because stopping to help would mean falling behind schedule. You plant seeds by hand, one at a time, bending over constantly until your spine begins to resemble the letter S, and your back muscles feel like they are being attacked by invisible demons with sharp knives. You pull weeds under the scorching sun until your hands are raw and bleeding, your skin is burned, and your vision starts to blur from heat exhaustion. You harvest grain with a sickle, cutting each stalk individually while insects swarm around your head and the sun beats down like the wrath of an angry god. There are no breaks during the workday, no lunch hour, no coffee breaks, no workplace safety regulations, and no concept of reasonable working conditions. You work from sunrise to sunset, which in summer means 14 to 16 hours of continuous physical labor with only brief pauses to drink warm ale and wipe the sweat from your eyes. The work schedule is 6 days per week, every week, with Sunday theoretically reserved for rest and religious observance. However, Sunday becomes a workday whenever the harvest is urgent, when the Lord needs something built or repaired, when there is a crisis that requires immediate attention, or when the Lord simply decides that his peasants are not working hard enough and need additional motivation. If you are a woman, congratulations on winning the medieval lottery of gender equality when it comes to back-breaking labor. You get to do all of the field work that men do, plus manage a household, care for children, cook meals, tend animals, spin wool into thread, weave thread into cloth, and somehow find time to sleep. Assuming your children do not wake you up during the night with crying, sickness, or nightmares. Medieval society believes firmly in equal opportunity suffering. Women work just as hard as men, suffer just as much as men, and die just as young as men, while also bearing the additional burden of childbirth, child-rearing, and domestic responsibilities that never end. The concept of gender-based division of labor exists, but it means that women do everything men do, plus a long list of additional tasks that are considered specifically feminine. Children start working as soon as they can walk upright and follow simple instructions. By age 5, they are carrying water, feeding chickens, gathering eggs, and learning that life is essentially one long endurance test that continues until death provides the only available retirement plan. There is no school, no childhood education, no time for play or recreation. Children are simply small adults who are not yet strong enough to do the heaviest work, but who are expected to contribute whatever labor they can provide, your payment for this lifetime of physical torture is elegantly simple. You receive just enough food to prevent death by starvation, assuming the harvest is successful. If the crops fail due to weather, disease, or other factors beyond your control, that becomes your problem rather than your Lord's problem. The Lord still expects to receive his full share of whatever food is produced, even if meeting his demands means that you and your family will starve. This economic arrangement is remarkably efficient from the Lord's perspective. He receives maximum benefit from your labor, while assuming minimum responsibility for your welfare. If you die from overwork, malnutrition, or disease, he can easily replace you with another desperate peasant who needs a place to work and live. You are as replaceable as a broken tool, and considerably less valuable than a good horse. As the sun climbs higher in the sky and your back begins to ache from 2 hours of bending over to plant seeds, you realize with horror that you have only completed a tiny fraction of your daily work quota. 10 more hours of identical labor await you, followed by the journey home to your flea-infested hut, followed by another night of restless sleep on rotting straw, followed by another identical day of medieval survival. This is your career, your profession, your economic destiny. There is no possibility of promotion, no opportunity for career advancement, no chance of improving your working conditions or increasing your compensation. You will perform the same back-breaking labor every day for the rest of your life, assuming you survive long enough to have a life worth measuring, and then you will die in the same social position where you were born, having spent your entire existence making other people wealthy while remaining desperately poor yourself. As the sun finally begins its descent toward the horizon after what feels like the longest day in the history of human civilization, you drag your broken body back toward your hut with barely enough energy to remain upright and place one foot in front of the other. Your back feels like it has been systematically dismantled by a team of medieval torture specialists who took particular pleasure in their work. Your hands are raw and bleeding from gripping rough wooden tools for 12 consecutive hours. Your feet, assuming you were unfortunate enough to spend the day barefoot, look like they've been used as practice targets by particularly sadistic archers. Every muscle in your body screams in protest with each step you take. Your spine has been compressed into a shape that would puzzle anatomists and horrify chiropractors. Your shoulders ache from carrying heavy loads across uneven terrain. Your knees buckle intermittently, reminding you that the human body was not designed to endure the kind of abuse that medieval peasant life demands on a daily basis. But your day is not over yet, because the concept of leisure time has not been invented for people in your social class. Now comes the evening meal, and you should probably adjust your expectations downward from the already impossibly low standards set by your breakfast experience. Medieval dinner makes medieval breakfast look like a feast prepared by master chefs using the finest ingredients available in the known world. Your evening meal consists of more pottage because the medieval culinary imagination apparently reached its creative peak with the invention of grey, lumpy, tasteless gruel, and everything else is just variations on that single theme. The same pot that provided your morning sustenance has been simmering over the fire all day, accumulating new flavors, new textures, and new mysteries that would challenge even the most adventurous modern food critics. During your absence, various family members have contributed additional ingredients to the communal pot. Your sister might have found some questionable mushrooms growing behind the hut. Your mother might have added water to stretch the mixture further. Your uncle might have contributed some vegetable scraps that were only slightly rotten. The cumulative effect of these additions is a dinner that is somehow even less appetizing than your breakfast, which seemed impossible but has been achieved through the miracle of medieval cooking techniques. If you are incredibly fortunate, there might be a turnip floating in your bowl of evening pottage. This represents the vegetable component of your meal, and vegetables are essentially medieval vitamins, except they taste like disappointment soaked in pond water and provide approximately the same nutritional value as chewing on pieces of wood that have been left outside during several rainstorms. Your bread remains hard enough to be used as construction material for small buildings. The loaf that challenged your jaw muscles this morning has spent the day absorbing moisture from the air, which has not made it softer, but has instead given it a chewy texture that requires even more effort to consume. Eating this bread is like trying to digest roofing materials, and your teeth make grinding sounds that can be heard across the room. Your beverage options have not improved since morning. You still have access to weak ale, which remains the safest liquid available because the alternative is water that could kill you faster than most medieval diseases. The ale tastes like someone dissolved stale bread in dirty water and then added just enough alcohol to make the mixture technically qualify as a beverage, but not enough alcohol to make drinking it an enjoyable experience. As you sit around the fire with your family, sharing this feast of medieval sadness, the conversation tends to revolve around topics that would put modern dinner guests to sleep within minutes. Tonight's riveting discussion topics include whose turn it is to repair the hole in the thatched roof, whether the chickens are laying enough eggs to justify keeping them alive, speculation about whether this winter will kill more people than last winter, and detailed analysis of various neighbors' personal hygiene habits. Your children, who have been working alongside you in the fields all day despite being barely old enough to walk properly, are too tired to complain about the food, the accommodations, or the general horror of their daily existence. They simply eat whatever is placed in front of them and prepare for another night of sleeping on straw while insects use their small bodies as an all-night buffet. Child psychology has not been invented yet, so nobody worries about the long-term emotional and psychological effects of raising children in conditions that would be considered abusive by modern standards. Medieval parents assume that children who survive to adulthood will be stronger and more resilient as a result of their harsh upbringing, and they are probably correct, assuming the children actually survive to adulthood, which is not guaranteed. After dinner, there is no entertainment, no recreation, no relaxation, and no concept of leisure activities designed to help people unwind after a hard day of work. There are no books to read because you cannot read and because books do not exist for people in your social class. There are no games to play because you do not have time for frivolous activities and because game materials cost money that you do not have. There is no music unless someone in your village owns an instrument and has enough energy left at the end of the day to play it, which almost never happens. Most evenings are spent sitting by the fire, mending clothes that are already beyond repair, discussing practical matters related to survival, and trying not to think too much about the fact that tomorrow will be identical to today, and the day after tomorrow will be identical to tomorrow, and this pattern will continue until death provides the only available escape from the cycle of medieval misery. You go to bed when darkness falls, not because you are particularly tired, although you are exhausted beyond the point where exhaustion has any meaning, but because candles are expensive luxuries that peasants cannot afford, and firewood is too precious to waste on providing light for activities that do not directly contribute to survival. You lie down on your straw mattress, which has not improved during your absence and may actually have acquired some new residence while you were working in the fields. You pull your grimy blanket over your head, not for warmth but to create a barrier between yourself and the insects that will spend the night exploring your body, like tiny tourists visiting an all-inclusive resort. The sounds of your medieval household settling down for the night create a symphony of human misery that would inspire poets to write tragic verses, assuming any poets existed who were interested in documenting the lives of people who do not matter. Your grandmother coughs, with the persistence of someone who has been coughing for so long that it has become her primary form of communication. Your uncle snores like a wounded bear having nightmares about being chased by hunters. The animals in your hut make various noises that remind you that privacy is a luxury reserved for people who can afford to live alone. As you close your eyes and try to find a comfortable position on your bed of rotting vegetation, you reflect on the day that has just ended. You woke up covered in insect bites and human filth. You relieved yourself in a bucket that you then dumped into the street. You ate food that barely qualified as edible. You worked until your body screamed for mercy. You returned home to eat more inedible food. And now you are preparing to sleep in the same conditions where you started. Tired, hungry, dirty, and hoping that tomorrow will not be the day that finally kills you. This has been one complete day in your medieval existence. Not a particularly bad day, not a particularly good day, just a normal day in the life of a 13th century peasant. And you have approximately 10,000 more days, just like this one ahead of you, assuming you are fortunate enough to live that long, which is not statistically likely given the mortality rates in medieval Europe. Tomorrow you will wake up and repeat this entire process, and the day after that you will wake up and repeat it again, and this cycle will continue until disease, starvation, accident, or old age brings your participation in medieval society to its inevitable conclusion. This is your life, your destiny, and your contribution to human civilization, working yourself to death, so that other people can live in comfort while you exist in conditions that would make modern prisoners riot and demand better treatment. Welcome to medieval Europe, where every day is a test of human endurance, and the only reward for surviving is the opportunity to face another identical day of suffering tomorrow. Epilogue. So there you have it, dear reader. One complete day in medieval Europe, from the moment you wake up covered in flea bites and existential dread to the moment you fall asleep wondering if you will survive until morning. And more importantly, wondering if you actually want to survive until morning given what tomorrow has in store for you. And this was actually a remarkably good day by medieval standards. Nobody in your family died of plague, which is always a pleasant surprise in an era when bubonic death can arrive as unexpectedly as a dinner invitation. Your hut did not burn down, which happens frequently enough that most medieval families consider fire insurance to be a luxury they cannot afford, mainly because insurance has not been invented yet. Raiders did not attack your village, steal your meager possessions, and carry off your relatives to be sold in distant slave markets. You were not accused of witchcraft by your neighbors, which is the medieval equivalent of being accused of tax evasion by people who do not understand how taxes work. Your lord did not decide to increase your rent, demand additional labor, or execute you for some minor infraction of rules that change depending on his mood and the phases of the moon. The harvest appears to be proceeding normally, which means you might actually have enough food to survive the coming winter, assuming nothing goes wrong between now and the time when the crops are safely stored away. You have just experienced what daily life was really like for approximately 90% of all human beings who lived during the Middle Ages, not the romanticized version featuring noble knights, fair maidens, grand tournaments, and castle feasts that Hollywood has been selling to modern audiences for decades, but the brutal, unforgiving reality of constant hunger, pain, fear, exhaustion, and degradation that defined medieval existence for the vast majority of people who were unfortunate enough to be born during that period of human history. The next time you find yourself complaining about your morning commute, pause for a moment and remember the medieval peasant who walked barefoot through streams of human waste to reach a field where he would spend 14 hours breaking his back for someone else's profit, while hoping that the bread he ate for breakfast would not kill him before dinner time. When you feel annoyed because your coffee is not hot enough, think about the person who drank weak ale for breakfast, because water was too dangerous to consume, and because coffee beans were growing on plants in distant continents that Europeans did not even know existed. When you feel frustrated with your job, your boss, or your working conditions, consider the medieval farmer who worked every day except Sunday, had no vacation time, no sick leave, no health insurance, no retirement plan, and whose entire compensation package consisted of just enough food to prevent death by starvation. Assuming his lord was feeling generous and assuming the harvest was successful. When you worry about your health or feel anxious about minor medical issues, remember that medieval people lived their entire lives with constant physical pain, had no access to effective medicine, no understanding of basic hygiene, no knowledge of disease prevention, and considered reaching the age of 40 to be a remarkable achievement worthy of celebration, assuming they had enough energy left to celebrate anything. The medieval world was not a simpler time filled with more authentic human connections and deeper spiritual meaning. It was a harder time, a crueler time, a more dangerous time, and a significantly shorter time for most people who were unlucky enough to experience it firsthand. Medieval people were not happier, more fulfilled, more connected to nature, or more spiritually enlightened than modern people. They were hungry, dirty, sick, scared, and desperately trying to survive in a world that seemed designed specifically to kill them in the most unpleasant ways possible. The romantic notion of medieval life that pervades modern culture is a fantasy created by people who have never experienced true hardship, genuine poverty, or the constant fear of death that characterized daily existence for our ancestors. The knights in shining armor were a tiny minority of wealthy warriors who spent most of their time fighting each other over land and resources, while the peasants who supported them lived in conditions that would make modern prison inmates demand better treatment. The castles that looked so majestic in movies and television shows were actually cold, damp, drafty stone refrigerators filled with fleas, smoke, and politically motivated marriages between people who had never met each other before their wedding day. Even the nobles who lived in these castles had a 50% chance of dying from infected wounds, food poisoning, or political assassination before reaching middle age. The simpler times were not simple at all. Everything took longer, hurt more, and carried greater risks than anything most modern people can imagine. Childbirth was a death lottery where both mother and child faced significant chances of mortality. Chewing food was dangerous because dental care consisted of pulling teeth with pliers and no anesthesia. Walking to the market was an adventure in disease prevention because the streets were flowing with human waste and dead animals. But here is the most remarkable thing about human nature, and the aspect of medieval life that truly deserves our admiration and respect, despite all of this suffering. Despite all of this hardship, despite all of this constant danger and degradation, medieval people still found ways to laugh, to love, to hope, and to dream. They told stories around their fires, sang songs while they worked, fell in love despite arranged marriages, and celebrated small victories even when everything else in their lives was falling apart. They created beautiful art, magnificent cathedrals, moving literature, and inspiring music, all while living in conditions that would break the spirit of most modern people within a matter of days. They found meaning in their relationships, their communities, their faith, and their families, even when those relationships were constrained by social hierarchies that modern people would consider oppressive and unjust. Their suffering was not noble, romantic, or spiritually purifying. It was simply the price they paid for being born into a world that had not yet developed the technologies, social institutions, and medical knowledge necessary to provide basic comfort, security, and dignity for all human beings. They endured because endurance was their only option, and they found joy wherever they could because joy was the only thing that made endurance bearable. Medieval peasants did not choose their hard lives, and they did not embrace poverty and suffering as paths to enlightenment or spiritual growth. They simply made the best of circumstances that were beyond their control, and they passed down their strength, resilience, and determination to the generations that followed them. Every modern convenience, every medical advancement, every social reform, and every human right that we take for granted today exists because our ancestors refused to accept that suffering was the natural condition of human existence. Today, when you flip a light switch and electricity illuminates your room, you are enjoying a luxury that medieval people could not even imagine. When you turn a handle and clean water flows from a tap, you are accessing a resource that was worth more than gold in the medieval world. When you eat fresh food that has been refrigerated, processed safely, and transported from distant locations, you are consuming meals that would have seemed like magic to people who lived their entire lives on the edge of starvation. When you visit a doctor who can diagnose your illness, prescribe effective medicine, and perform surgery with minimal risk, you are receiving medical care that would have been considered divine intervention by people who died from infections that modern antibiotics can cure in a matter of days. When you communicate instantly with people on the other side of the world, travel hundreds of miles in a matter of hours, or access the accumulated knowledge of human civilization through a device that fits in your pocket, you are using technologies that medieval people would have classified as supernatural powers. Your worst day, your most difficult challenge, your greatest hardship is probably still better than the best day experienced by most medieval peasants. The problems that keep you awake at night would have seemed like minor inconveniences to people who went to sleep every night wondering if they would wake up in the morning, and if they did wake up, whether they would find enough food to survive another day. This is not to minimize modern suffering or suggest that contemporary problems are not real and significant. Mental health issues, social inequality, environmental challenges, and personal struggles are genuine sources of pain and difficulty for people living today, but understanding the historical context of human suffering can provide perspective on our current challenges and remind us that we are living in the most prosperous, healthy, safe, and comfortable period in human history. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by modern life, remember the medieval peasant who would have traded places with you instantly, without hesitation, and without asking questions about the details of your supposedly difficult existence. Remember that the strength, resilience, hope, and determination that carried our ancestors through the darkest chapters of human history still flow in your veins today. You are tougher than you think, luckier than you realize, and more capable than you imagine. You are part of a story that began with people who'd survived unimaginable hardships and continued with each generation that refused to accept that suffering was inevitable. You are living proof that human beings can overcome any obstacle, endure any challenge, and create better lives for themselves and their children, no matter how impossible the circumstances may seem. And perhaps most importantly, you are responsible for continuing that story, for building on the foundation that your ancestors created with their blood, sweat, tears, and determination. Every time you choose hope over despair, kindness over cruelty, progress over stagnation, and love over fear, you are honoring the memory of every medieval peasant who dreamed of a better world and refused to give up, even when giving up would have been easier than continuing to fight for survival in a world that seemed designed to crush the human spirit. The medieval peasant in you is still there, still strong, still resilient, still capable of enduring whatever challenges life may present. You are their legacy, their victory, and their hope made manifest in the modern world. Never forget that. You carry their strength within you, and never underestimate your ability to overcome whatever obstacles may stand between you and the life you want to create for yourself and for future generations.